So in this investigation, our first one in accentuate the negative, it says how can you find the total value of a combination of positive and negative integers? And remember, an integer is numbers that include 0 and go 1, 2, 3, and so on, but also go the other way. Okay? So to kind of piggyback off the video, it says last year we played a math pursuit game as a review called Math Fever. The class was divided into 3 teams. They called themselves Super Brains, Rocket Scientists, and Know-It-Alls. Okay, and those were the categories. So in part A, it says one team starts the game by choosing a question, a category, and a point value. The first team to buzz first and answer the question correctly gets the point value. If a team answers a question incorrectly, the value is subtracted from their score. So here is the point value after in one game. Okay, the Super Brains had negative 300 points. The Rocket Scientists had 150 points. And the Know-It-Alls had negative 500 points. So what I want you guys to do in your team is just answer that first part there in part A. Which team has the highest score? And then again, you're going to find those point differences. And then down below, you're going to write some number sentences to see how you come up with these point values on the right-hand side. So I'm going to pause this video, and we're going to give you guys about 5 to 7 minutes to work on this with your team. Okay? And see what you can come up with. All right? So we're going to pause. All right, we're going to move forward here. So which team had the highest score? Who can tell me? Which team had the highest score? Blake. Yeah, the Rocket Scientists had the highest score. And the reason being is because why? What's the difference between these 3 numbers? I don't know. Right. The Super Brains and the Know-It-Alls are both negative numbers. Positive numbers are always bigger than negative numbers. So the Rocket Scientists are the only one that have a positive number. So what's the difference between the Super Brains, which is negative 300, and the Rocket Scientists, which is 150? Lily? 450. It's a 450 point difference, right? How'd you figure that out? So 300 from 150 and you got 450? Good. Okay. What about from the Super Brains to the Know-It-Alls? What's the difference there? Aiden? Yeah, so it's a 200 point difference, right? It goes down 200 more points. So actually the lowest score goes to the Know-It-Alls because they're the furthest away from 0, right? All right, so what about the difference between the Rocket Scientists and the Know-It-Alls? 650. Good. So what was one of the number sentences you came up with for these Super Brains? What, if you look at the table up above, right, the different ways they could have gotten their score, and obviously they would have to answer 2 incorrect questions, right, for them to be negative, or several incorrect questions. So, Lily, give me one of your number sentences. Okay, so you had negative 200, and then you basically add a negative 100 to it, right? Okay. Anyone come up with something different as a second option? Again, we could have lots of different answers here, right? So we're only giving you 2. Aiden?
They got 3 100 points wrong.
Okay, so 300 point questions also add up to negative 300, right? Okay, good. What about the rocket scientists? How did the rocket scientists get to 150? What was one of the answers you guys came up with for one of your number sentences? Elena.
Negative 100 plus negative 50.
Well, they're positive, remember? You came up with negative 150 there.
100 plus 50.
Okay, so they got a 100 point question right and a 50 point question right. Okay, Ashley, what was one of yours?
50 minus 100.
Okay, so she had 250, and then they got a 100-point question wrong. Okay, and again, remember, there's lots of different ways. They could have answered 350-point questions. They could have. There's so many different possibilities. All right, what about the know-it-alls? What's one of the things they could have done to get to negative 500? Aiden.
They got one letter wrong. They got
Okay.
25 wrong. And 150, or no, they got 250.
250.
And 150.
Okay. Good. That equals negative 500. Okay. One more. Come on with it. Who had a different one? Who had a different one? Isabel.
I had minus or yeah, minus 50 times 10. Negative 50 times 10. Or,
We're adding here. So if you had negative 50 times 10, that means you would have had to have 50. The 50. You answered 50 points. We don't have 10 questions in there. There's only 6 categories. Aiden.
they got two 250s wrong.
All right. So you had two 250s. So again, you're defining different combinations within those 6 categories. You could have probably done those if you did 6 of those 50-point categories. That's 300, right? Then you could have maybe added a 200 to that if they got it wrong. All right. So lots of different ways to come up with those numbers, right? Again, so many combinations. Those are only 2 of those. All right. Very good. So let's move to the back side. So it says in this unit, accentuate the negative. You'll be working with integers. Integers are the set of whole numbers. And remember, what are whole numbers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 0, right? Natural numbers are your counting numbers. We don't use 0. They're opposites, right? So if you got whole numbers, which are 1, 2, 3, the opposite of 1 is negative 1 and 0. Integers and fractions, both positive and negative, and their equivalent decimals are called rational numbers. So as you work through the next problem, think about which operations you use to keep track of scores. Notice how the scores go higher or lower depending on whether a team answers a question correctly or incorrectly. So in part B, our scenario now is this way. So the current team scores are negative 300 for the super brains, 150 for the rocket scientists, and negative 500 for the know-it-alls. All right, so it says write a number sentence to represent each sequence of points from the table. Start with the current score of your team. All right, so if you look at the super brains, they answer a 200-point question correctly, a 150-point question incorrectly, and then two 50-point questions correctly. So where would that leave them, okay, from where they are at right now? Okay, so basically, if this is where they started, where would they end up at? So I just want you to do part B. And you're going to do the same thing for the rocket scientists and work out the stuff out here. And then you do the same thing for the know-it-alls and work it out here. Let's see what they come up with. All right? All right. I'll give you guys a few minutes to work on that. I'll pause it again. All right. So, here we go. So, remember the super brain started out at 300, right? So your number sentence should look something like that. All right, negative 300, then they got 200 right, so you had to add it. They got 150 wrong, so that's a subtraction, and then 2 correct ones, so you get negative 150. How many groups got negative 150? Very good. All right. Rocket scientists start out at how many points? 150, right? So they got 50 question incorrect, a 200 question incorrect, a 100 question correct, and a 150-point question incorrect. So what do you notice? They ended up with the same score. What about the know-it-alls? Started at negative 500, got a 100-point question incorrect, a 200-point question correct, and then they went south again, right? So they ended up with minus 600. How many people got that? How many groups? Minus 600. Okay. So Which team has the highest score at this point in the game? Yeah, it's tied between the rocket scientists and the super brains, right? They have the same score at negative 150. Right here and right here. So obviously the team who has the lowest score is, yeah, the know-it-alls. So between the rocket scientists and the super brains, what's the point difference? Yeah, 0. What about between the super brains and the know-it-alls? Right, there's a 450 point difference. And obviously because the rocket scientists and the super brains had the same score, there's the same difference between those two as well, right? Right? Yeah, 450. All right, so for our last part, it says the number sentences below describe what happened at a particular point during a game of Math Fever during a different hour of math. So find the missing number for each number sentence and explain what your solution means in terms of the game. Negative 200 means they answered a 200-point question wrong, so you would subtract 200. Use loose leaf paper if needed. So as you can see there's 5 teams in this other game, right? So you can see, so you're going to basically fill in the missing blank to make it work for C. And then for D, it says that Louisa answered a 300-point question correctly and a 400-point question incorrectly. Louisa and Sam used different methods to keep score. So who is correct and explain why? So now you and your teammates are going to finish C and D up. Okay? All right. So let me bring it down to here. This is what you and your teammates are going to finish up. All right, and about halfway between the 10 and the 11 on the big hand is when we'll come together and see how you did. All right, let's see what you can do to fill in and make those work. We are going to pause the video one more time. All right, let's for time purposes here, let's see how you did. We can talk about part D together. So Brainiac had a minus 200, a plus 150, and a minus 100. What did they get? What was their total, Blake? Almost, right? If negative 200 plus 50, 150 is what? Negative 50, right? And then when I subtract 100, you should have negative 150 for that. Oops, it's frozen. There it is, negative 150. So that means they got a 200-point question. What? Right or wrong? Wrong. A 150-point question, correct, and then a 100-point question, wrong. Good. All right. What about the extremes? What'd you come up with for the extremes? What's their point total, Robert?
150.
Right, 150. So that means they got a 450-point question, right, and a 300-point question, wrong. Good. What about the X cells? Actually, negative 150. Good. So they got a 300-point question right and a 450-point question wrong. Kind of flip-flopped what the extremes did, right? What about the amazing M's? Amazing M's. Aiden. Yeah, because your final answer has to arrive at 150, right? So what do we have to do to 350 to get to 150? Add 200. Very good. So that means they got a 350-point question wrong and a 200-point question correct. All right. Last question, Martina. What'd you get for the totally A's? Yeah, minus 100 has to go in that box because 350 plus a minus 100 gives you negative 450. All right, very good. So let's think about this. So it says Louisa answers a 300-point question correctly and a 400-point question incorrectly. Louisa and Sam use different methods to keep score. So Louisa said, well, 300 minus 400 equals negative 100. And Sam said, well, 300, and if I add negative 400 to it, I get negative 100. So who's right, Lily? Huh? Louisa's right? Why is Louisa right? Don't tell her the answer.
Oh,
I want to know why Louisa's right.
it, it's only two.
Okay, so we'd subtract those two to find the answer.
I think they're both right because if you did 300 minus 400, it gets negative 100. But if you did 300 plus negative 400, it's a negative number, so it's gonna. And since it's greater than the positive number, it's gonna go.
Right, she subtracted 400. Even when you add a negative, you're still subtracting, right? Notice how they came up with the same answer, right? That's very good. So they both are correct. Because Louisa just subtracted 400 from 300, and Sam added a negative 400 to 300, which basically is the same operation. You can either subtract or add a negative. It's the same thing. So, and again, also the last sentence says too, they both arrived at the same answer. Notice right here, right? Didn't they get the same answer? So again, lots of things in math, lots of times we can do things differently and arrive at the same answer. Right? All right, so you guys have some class time. Here's your homework for tonight. Page 20, problems 1 to 8. And that's in your new book. That's in your new book. 1 to 8.